Yo viví en Nueva York y en París, un poco en Roma, y llegó un momento en que quería regresar al Oaxaca porque no hace tanto frío como en Europa y como en Estados Unidos. Las instituciones culturales que se han abierto 30 años hace han cambiado todo el panorama, toda la ciudad, talleres, en escuelas de arte, en ver exposiciones. Cuando se empezaron a trabajar pues todos esos proyectos, no sabíamos realmente cuál iba a ser el resultado. Pues se hizo espontáneamente, pero no se hizo con un propósito, no había un plan que pudiera dar un resultado como el que se dio.
Oaxaca has really done a remarkable job. The galleries, the museums are some of the best in the country. And it was basically the efforts of Francisco Toledo, a leading artist, and of Alejandro de Avila, who is a compadre of Francisco Toledo. And they were able to convince the city council, the politicians, of making decisions on museums and galleries rather than going the commercial kind of way. Toledo was famous for keeping a McDonald's out of the Zocalo, the city square, saying that this is the kind of thing that we do not need. Tourists do not come to have a McDonald's. They want to see Oaxaca. One of the things that Toledo did in particular was he brought over Finnish paper makers to establish a paper-making operation, but using the plants and materials that come from Oaxaca.
Entonces estos amigos finlandeses habían hecho talleres para hacer papel. Y cuando vinieron a Oaxaca propusieron montar un taller y lo único que teníamos que hacer era comprar la máquina, la pila holandesa, que está allá. Y cuando llegó, pues no sabíamos dónde poner la máquina, porque pues necesita mucha agua, necesita instalaciones eléctricas. Al final descubrimos que había este pueblo de la montaña, de donde hay mucha agua, que el agua de Oaxaca, como un 30 o 40%, sale de aquí. Y entonces, aquí instalamos el primer taller. Y al principio hacíamos cuadernos, hacíamos papel, y poco a poco pues, fuimos diversificando, haciendo otro tipo de trabajo, los papalotes. Y bueno, después llegó Kif y le invitamos a trabajar y bueno, desde entonces ella ha venido, no sé, 1 o 2 veces al año a trabajar aquí a Oaxaca.
Toledo asked me to design jewelry that the people working here could reproduce. And I said, oh no, I can't possibly do that. But of course, he put that idea out there, so that's how it started.
Ha sido muy benéfico para el taller porque Kif tiene muchos conocimientos, sabe manejar el papel muy bien y ella regala su trabajo al taller para que el taller siga manteniéndose, siga existiendo, ¿no? Pero bueno, el resultado es muy, muy bueno, muy bello.
I didn't intend to be a jeweler. I didn't regard jewelry very highly, to be frank. But my husband and I first came to Oaxaca almost 50 years ago. At that time, we went to Monte Alban. We went very early one morning, and it was very calm, very peaceful, no one else there, and it was fantastic. We saw the jewelry from Tomb 7. It made a deep impression. It was the intimacy of the small scale and its impact that stayed with me, although it had nothing to do with, oh, I'm going to make jewelry. It's more now I see. The seed was planted. With this piece, I'm trying to figure out how to make the curve correct. The building was originally a hydroelectric plant in the 19th century. It's a great place for making paper since you need the water. So always you have the sound of the water here.
Estoy haciendo un collar que se llama agave. Luce puesto, pues luce como tal, como un agave abierto. Pues bueno, es bastante resistente. Todo el mundo nos pregunta qué pasa si se moja, porque es papel, pero realmente no pasa gran cosa. Consta de 2 tamaños diferentes de piezas. Difiere más que nada el tamaño y el grosor del papel. Nosotros le pintamos la orilla porque le da un efecto diferente. Es como el distintivo de nuestra diseñadora de joyería, la orillita pintada. Nosotros cuando trabajamos con la señora aquí siempre nos platicamos mucho acerca del movimiento que debe tener la pieza. Sentimos que debe ser como parte de cada cuerpo también. Entonces siempre se ve diferente una pieza en la mesa y pues ya puesta. Ella tiene una sensibilidad increíble para crear piezas que a veces uno las ve y dice, eso no puede ser una pieza de joyería, pero que ya puesta, toma como vida. De Keeps Lemons, en cuanto a diseñadora, yo he aprendido a que cuando yo hago una pieza de joyería, que va a hablar mucho de mí, de mi persona, de quien la hizo, ¿no? Porque cada pieza es como parte de mi identidad, de si soy cuidadosa o no, ¿no?
In a way, I really was working in the beginning as a teacher of design. And this is not so much related to the way I work in metal, which is completely different. This is my Petri dish. There's no great value in any individual objects, but there's something that can happen from looking at the juxtapositions of these things. I was never attracted to the preciousness idea of jewelry, of diamonds, gold in the materials. What I valued were things that were maybe overlooked or disregarded in the culture. And I began to use some of those materials. I'm often put in that place that I work with found objects, but I think in some ways I'm difficult to categorize or define within the jewelry movement. For me, it's not the technique of how I make something, but the why I make something. And if something doesn't have vitality for me, well then there's no point. So the why is more important than how.
If you really look at Chicago now, you can see how the Mexican immigrants and community have greatly affected, in a positive way, the fabric of this city. One of the most important ideas that this museum has had is the concept of sin fronteras. And what that basically means is that there are no borders when it comes to culture, when it comes to community. Borders do not exist in the arts. The strength of artwork is that it can create bridges. It can show you what you have in common with all humanity, and it can do it in a very subtle and quiet way. This museum's relationship with Francisco Toledo goes way back. The museum was a year old in 1988, and we displayed the very first solo exhibition of Maestro Toledo in a museum in the United States. And it just made so much sense that we would, almost 30 years later, open our gallery doors to the more recent work of the Maestro Toledo's studios. This recent work from Casa, Casa being the Cultural Arts Center in San Agustin, outside of Oaxaca City, that was founded by Maestro Toledo, and the works that are on our walls come from that space. They work felt and many other materials that are traditional, yet the way they do it is very, very contemporary. There were many hands that were a part of the creation of these works, but there was one vision, there was one mind behind it, which would have been Francisco Toledo.
There was a similarity in how he set up the felt workshop to the paper workshop. Somehow he has ways of bringing out the best use of these materials in an expressive way. And he has a much wider view than a single media, a single technique, a single means of expression. I think that Toledo is always seeing, looking for, making connections for his personal exploration, but also for the survival, for the vitality of the culture that he cares so much about in Oaxaca. I'm not sure he likes the term activist, but I think of him as that, as a cultural activist.
La idea del taller es hacer también un taller que pudiera no ser contaminante, que ecológicamente pueda funcionar haciendo muy poco daño a la naturaleza. Por otro lado, también se quiso hacer usar los árboles, las plantas de la región para hacer papel. No solamente algodón, sino aquí hay otras plantas como el pochote, chichicasle. Hay muchas plantas en Oaxaca que pueden servir para hacer papel, ¿no?
Todo tiene que ser natural. La pigmentación de las fibras, si tú quieres un color en especial, tiene que ser natural. E igualmente la decoración de este tiene que ser natural, porque toda la cantidad de agua se reintegra a la red municipal, que por lo general es para consumo humano. Listo.
Esto es una cooperativa y esta cooperativa, bueno, pues tiene sus altibajos, a veces va bien, a veces no va bien, pero con la ayuda de Kif y bueno, la mía también, ha podido sobrevivir, ¿no?
There are two kinds of borders. Borders in the minds and physical borders. And often it is art and artists who cross those borders and exchange way more easily than most. And to do it maybe indirectly through this very humble project gives me the opportunity to advocate for many things, really. For jewelry, for art, for fewer borders.